Welcome to the Prison Professors Podcast. We serve people who face challenges with prosecution, sentencing, and prison. My co-founders are Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. My name is Michael Santos. We create digital content and our team offers individual consulting services. We also assist agencies that want to improve outcomes. To learn how we can help you, text the word Prison Pro to 44222. Again, text Prison Pro to 44222 and get our free brochure. You can also visit us at prisonprofessors.com or contact Justin at 818-424-2220. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Send confirmation that you reviewed our podcast and we'll send you a free digital book. Stay tuned for a 20 to 30-minute episode of Prison Professors. I'm Michael Santos, your host. I'm very excited to be here with my friend Thad Roberts. I met Thad when we were together inside of federal prison. In fact, we were at a prison in Oklahoma. We later transferred to a prison in Florence, Colorado, where we served time together. When I met Thad, he told me his name was Moonrock, and I didn't quite understand why until he told me the story. Turns out that Thad was in love with a young woman while he was working at NASA. He promised her the moon, and then he delivered. Thad stole some rocks that had been retrieved that astronauts had brought back from the moon, and as a consequence of that, FBI agents later took him into custody, and I met him in federal prison where he was serving a 100-month sentence. What I'd like Thad to talk with us about today is how he adjusted, how he maintained his strength, his dignity, and his tenacity, and most importantly, how he positioned himself to come back to society strong. Thad Roberts, welcome to the Earning Freedom Podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. I'm happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your journey. I know that you were working at NASA, as I said. I know that you were brought into prison because of the Moonrock episode. I'd like to hear, how does an astrophysicist, a smart guy like you, adjust when he's faced with serving a prison sentence of 100 months?
I'm not going to pretend it's not a difficult thing, but I think everyone faces difficult times in their life. And at some point, we have to realize there's two possible ways to respond: be defeated or just decide to stand up and go on.
Well, it's easier said than done. You were able to stand up and go on. Give us the talking points. Give us the strategy that empowered you along the way.
I think one of the big transition points for me was to realize that my first response to all of this was to feel that I deserved to be abandoned, and I felt ashamed, and I went through all these negative emotions for years. And at some point, it was really too much to handle, and I had to decide. I had to switch gears from trying to impress others or always try to get the acceptance of others to realizing that that's all kind of shallow and meaningless to begin with. And what I really should be trying to do is impress myself and live my own life.
And so what did you do while you were in there? Did you come to that conclusion at the earliest stages of your journey? Did it take some time to adjust to the concrete and steel hotel?
That took me about 2 years to get to that point, and that transformed everything and made it a lot easier. I started living more of a monastic life that was centered around my own goals, and I would wake up, despite being in prison, I would wake up filled full of life and excitement to go for the goals I had set for myself. I'd read for several hours every day. I'd go run around the track and go work out, and I'd come back and write. And I was focused on trying to explore the mysteries of physics. And it turns out that pretty much every major physicist I know could probably use a good 6-year sabbatical.
Well, Thad, I know that you also really gave of yourself. You were inside of the federal prison and you worked pretty hard to try and inspire other people through your teaching. Tell us about the courses that you taught and your methodology for teaching with such limited resources.
Well, I taught a basic astronomy class and basic science and a beginning art class. My favorite one was the basic astronomy. I always had students that they represented the wide gambit of possible society members, from drug dealers to doctors and lawyers. And so I had to try to tailor the messages to an audience that didn't necessarily share the same vocabulary. And so the one thing we all share is that we're all human, and if we can relate a story to the individual human, then we can all talk about it at the same time. So I had to break down the basic concepts of science into a motif that the individual could hear and understand how it translates to their own personal life and why exploring these concepts can actually change their life.
There was a great author. His name is Viktor Frankl. You may have read his book, A Man's Search for Meaning, where he spoke about when we are in difficulty, when we are facing challenges, when we are facing struggle, we can always empower ourselves by helping others. And that was one of the virtues that I admired in you, Thad, when we were together, is that you were always very concerned about the other people who were incarcerated and always eager to help somebody, whether it was with basic math as they prepared for their GED or understanding astronomy. Tell us a little bit about, do you remember any specific episodes or whether the Bureau of Prisons was supportive of your efforts to help, or if you had any specific episodes that you can help us, kind of grasp how you just maintained your sense of purpose while you were inside of that institution?
Well, frankly, I didn't really feel like I was getting much support from the Bureau of Prisons. In fact, I felt like I was being hindered in a lot of ways, being randomly punished for, as one of the COs said, well, when I come to your room, you're always either reading or writing, and that's why I got punished. But it didn't quite make sense. However, that got balanced with the interpersonal connections that I got to see flourish and develop. For example, this one kid named Joey, after knowing him for about 6 months, he confessed to me that he didn't know how to read. And my response was, well, you still got, 3 years left? In 3 years from now, excuse me, if you learned 5 words a day from the dictionary, you would have a better vocabulary than I do by the time you get out. And at first he was a bit discouraged, but it only took him about 2 weeks till he was thrilled to explore this project. And there was a really awkward phase about a couple of months down the line where he was, he came from this vernacular of kind of gangster speak and kind of more violent phrases. And then he would be throwing in these really big words and be trying to, he was trying to figure out how to talk and mix them both. But eventually, when he got out, he went and wrote an essay to the University of Colorado. And they actually their policy was not to accept felons, but he wrote an essay to ask for an acceptance to the policy to be admitted into the college. And the dean called him in and told him it was the best essay he'd ever seen written on any topic and gave him a full ride scholarship.
Wow, that is an amazing story, and to think that you had a role in transforming that life. But as you were telling me that story, it reminded me of the earliest phase of my journey when I was locked inside of, I think I was still in the Pierce County Jail before I'd even been transitioned into prison. And I really developed this sense of liberty that I could find by developing communication skills. And that was really the hope, I think, that I was able to instill just by learning to develop a skill set that would help me read without having to go to a dictionary, or help me write a letter that I could, feel proud of. And of course, back then, I thought that those letters were going to transform my life. And now I'm back 26, 27, 28 years later. And I saw that my journey was fundamentally different from what anybody would have expected, really because I did exactly what you were prescribing to that young man. And you must feel an incredible sense of gratitude in knowing that you set this man on to earn his own freedom through education. Are you still in touch with him?
Actually, I just saw him yesterday. I just flew back from Denver, Colorado. He came out to meet me because he lives nearby. Yeah, and I also drove to Colorado for his graduation because I was super proud of him.
How old is this young man?
He is now? Maybe 32?
So one of the courses that we teach here in the Earning Freedom Network is this program called the Straight A Guide, and I developed that after you and I parted ways. You got out of prison, and I was transitioned to other prisons, and I developed this course where I try and help people understand that, incarceration can come in many different forms. In fact, you and I had spoken about this, that since I've been released from prison, I've met many people out here in society who live in a much bigger prison than I was ever in. They're so, imprisoned by their thoughts and by their perspectives. And there is always a way out. And that way out generally is with having a vision of how you want to emerge, putting a plan in place that will get you there, just like you showed to Joy with that learning 5 words a day, and then executing that plan. And to the extent that an individual does it, we can always earn freedom. We could always drive toward a higher purpose in life. And that applies to our marriage, our fitness, every area of our life. So I'm just really glad that I've had the opportunity to spend some time with you, and glad to hear this story that you were inspiring other people who were in struggle. Tell us about your life since you emerged from prison. When did you get out?
I got out in 2008. right when the Olympics came out. And, first thing I did after I was there in the halfway house for 3 or 4 days, I got my first pass. They gave me a bus pass, and I immediately kind of broke the rules. I had a friend pick me up at the first bus stop, and he took me up the mountains. We got lunch, and then he took me to the University of Utah, because there was some professors there that I had really good relationships with before, I really admired, and I wanted just to go tell them, how I felt, how much I still appreciated how they'd started the path of my life, but also to apologize if I'd let them down. And went to the physics department, and everybody was gone for lunch. So I went over to the geology department and had a really bad encounter with the professor there that I had really strong positive feelings for. And so I felt really sick after that. He was still holding a grudge and was very upset, and I wasn't even aware that he was personally upset before this. And so I came back down to the parking lot where my friend was waiting for me, and he saw how I was reacting, and he just told me just to go ahead and go back to the physics department and say what I need to say just to get it over with. And then I went back to the physics department, and as I was passing the secretary's office, the secretary recognized me as I was just walking by, and she came out and gave me a hug, and then we all crowded up, and all the professors that I used to know were still there, and we talked for several hours. And in particular, one of them, named Lynn, after a couple hours of talking, he asked me how I felt about my physics. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, well, do you feel still up on it? And I told him, well, actually, I feel a lot more confident in physics because I had a lot of time to really pursue the deep questions, the fundamental questions. And so he offered me a job being a TA as if I was already a grad student. And then I had to go back to the halfway house and tell them that I'd been offered a job. And it wasn't really the kind of traditional job they were used to approving. So I had to ask for special permission to even have the job. And then when I got it, that really started the entire new path of my life.
How long did that path last?
I went and finished a degree in physics and anthropology, and then went into the PhD program in theoretical astrophysics, and then wanted to switch over. I communicated with some of my heroes online, wrote my favorite books, and I told them I was having a little existential crisis about what I should do, continue to pursue the PhD program I was in, or switch over to something I was more passionate about. And they all advised I should go into the philosophy of physics program. So I decided to finish my bachelor's degree in philosophy to make sure I really wanted that. And I did, and then I got accepted into the PhD program from the philosophy department. And right then, when I got accepted, I got funding, then I got an email from the school, and it turns out the dean of the students had blocked my admittance now, and then fought to remove my degrees because she was personally offended that someone like me, meaning somebody that's been to prison or someone that stole moon rocks, had a degree from the same school as her. And so about this time, my girlfriend was finishing up her degrees, and now I was no longer in school, and my degrees had been forcibly taken from me, which is, I had a hard time dealing with that because it was very unfair and technically illegal, but I didn't have the money to fight it. And so we could no longer afford to feed ourselves, so we decided to go travel the world.
Well, that is a story I want to get into, but before I do, I want to take us back to a little bit about what you just said. You felt compelled to go back and apologize. Can you tell us what drove that need to go and reconcile in that kind of way? After a lot of introspection and all those quiet times thinking in prison about why I did what I did that got me there, there was clear parts of my past that I didn't want to move on from, didn't want to completely cut myself away from. And a lot of those had to do with the things I had learned while I was in college and some of the field trips I'd been on, and some of those figureheads that had introduced me to these new concepts of life, this new way of being, I needed to keep in my head. Well, that led to a contradiction when I felt like just moving on and forgetting my past. So I needed to reconcile that by going and talk to those people and at least tell them that I genuinely valued the start that they had given me. So did that help you come to terms internally, just expressing that remorse, even though there were people in the world who chose to reject you?
Yes, it did. And since then, I've learned to do this more upfront in all my relationships. So before I went to prison, I would do what I think almost everybody does. I would put my best face forward. And if you're in a strange environment, you don't know exactly what your best face is. So you spend some time looking around, seeing what other people expect of people, and then you present those qualifications that you have that happen to line up. And then you just don't talk about the rest. Well, that leads to a long-term, shallow relationship with everyone. And it's based on this fear that people will actually reject who you really are. After I got out, I started figuring out the best way to approach life, and the best way to approach your relationships was to, full force just throw out who you are, not in a way that's judgmental against others, but to let everyone go ahead and almost encourage them to judge you for who you are. Because as it turns out, yes, you will have people who hate you for it, but you'll also then expose yourself genuinely to the world, and the world then brings you what matches you best. So I found some fantastic friendships, some people who metaphysically get along with me perfectly since then, and it's been very comfortable and rewarding.
Well, one of the amazing, I guess, takeaways that I get from listening to your story, and we didn't rehearse this, so this is just coming organically, is the course that I teach, the Straight A Guide. We talk about the importance of identifying values that are important to you, and then setting goals within those value categories, and then advancing through the course by making 100% commitment to success as you define it, which is the right attitude. That's the first A of the Straight A Guide. We talk about envisioning what success looks like, and that's your aspiration, the second A in the Straight A Guide. We talk about taking incremental action steps along the way, and that's the third A of the Straight A Guide. Then it's accountability logs. We try to measure our progress almost in a methodical, scientific way, where we define what success is, and we try and take our steps there, one step in front of the other. And by doing that, we advance to the fifth A of the Straight A Guide, which is awareness. We become aware of opportunities that are around us. They're available to everybody, but those of us who are living on this disciplined, deliberate path can seize upon those opportunities or create new opportunities, and simultaneously the world becomes aware of us. Finally, there's two more A's, which is celebrating every achievement along the way, and then expressing our appreciation for the blessings that come back to us. When I listen to your story, Thad, I really hear the embodiment of this Straight A Guide, and I will be using this as a teaching tool in our mastermind course. I'm going to talk about you, and I hope that's okay, because you're stating how you have achieved this level of peace and balance in your life, not by accident, but because you have found what's important to you. It's important to be honest. It's important to be open, and through that process, new wonders open for you. And in fact, I suspect that it was that process that allowed you to travel the world without any money. And that's my second question. How was it that you said that you and your girlfriend you didn't have any money, but you were able to go and travel the world? Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, the points you just laid out, I think, are absolutely beautiful, specifically because I found that what holds most people back from chasing a dream or knowing what their passion is they don't have a clear picture of exactly what it's supposed to be. But all of your points were framed in a way that it was more, it's not about the actual end specific goal. It's about the journey along the way, about living a life that's full of passion. And that doesn't actually mean that you have to have a idea of exactly how it's supposed to turn out, because as it turns out, it almost always ends up better for everyone that just follows that path than you could even possibly imagine when you started. Well, so on my path then, when we were faced with this situation where the degrees are taken away and we don't have any money, we can't afford to pay rent, we had one thing. We had a vehicle, a Vanagon, a little hippie van, and we decided to start traveling. So we drove all the way down to Panama for several months, and then ended up in a situation where we could sail across the ocean. The guy wanted $5,000 to sail all the way to Europe for the two of us, and so we called up a friend, and he loaned us the $5,000. And basically, after the whole thing was done, we spent $10 to $15 a day for nearly 2 years, and we went to 37 countries.
Well, there you have it. Again, we're talking about an individual who knows what he wants, who goes about and pursues it with 100% effort, and is just really living his life with passion, and every day is rich. It's not by the amount of money in his pocket, it's because he's living his dream. Were you able to live that dream immediately after getting out of prison? Was every step, even through the challenges, part of your journey? And did you understand and embrace that? Or were there times that you sunk inside and felt a sense of despair? Because you sound like an eternally optimistic guy to me, Thad.
Eternally, maybe now. I really went through a hard time for the first 2 years and had to reanalyze everything in my life and all of my motivations, and had to try to figure out why I was so bent on trying to impress people or try to be the smartest or fastest or best and all these things that no one can really hold up to. But when it became more internal, when it was more about each day I wake up and I have an opportunity to experience something that I want to learn from, or a memory I want to have before I die, then when you see it that way, look, you're already starting with a limited clock. You might as well make today an adventure. Don't wait 5 years to have your adventure. You got to start today and every day. And from that perspective, there's an infinite available options for adventures. You can be reading a book and have an amazing adventure, and you can do that when you're in prison. You can learn something new. You can talk to a person next to you they may have never learned how to get close to before. And all these different levels of interacting with the world, if you're doing it on purpose, you can really just change your paradigm.
Well, actually, you really described how you did that. Even in prison, you were able to educate yourself in physics to a much higher level of competence than when you went in, came out. It resulted in you getting a great position in a university and advancing to your PhD program. But then when the external forces struck again, you could just bounce back. I mean, life isn't about having a piece of paper with a PhD. It's about really becoming the best in the world that you possibly can become, so that you are being measured and judged by the values that you say are important to you, not by any external force. And that's really why I think people were so willing to believe in you, to the extent that they would send you a check for $5,000 when you had no income. I mean, it's because I don't suspect that the individual would have sent $5,000 to just anybody, but it's because he believed in you, and he found perhaps a sense of strength in just seeing how you were out chasing your dreams and pursuing your dreams. And tell us a little bit more about those dreams, Thad. It's my understanding that there came a time when a famous author became aware of your work and started to bring it to the attention of even more people. Tell us about that.
Yeah, a friend of mine that actually came to visit in prison was interested in trying to get a movie made. And he came in and got the story about my past and got all the little details, and then took it out and shopped it. And it turns out Ben Mesrick got connected to him through that method. And Ben Mesrick decided to write a book called Sex on the Moon. And Ben's previous book was called Accidental Billionaires, which was turned into the movie The Social Network, which got all the critical acclaims, all the awards for the year. So it really hit the heat wave at the time. And currently they're still working out details of turning it into a movie.
So the book Sex on the Moon, is it what? Sex on the Moon?
Sex on the Moon.
Sex on the Moon is based on your life. What type of feeling do you have in knowing that tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions of people are getting a richer experience in life just by reading about yours? How is that making you feel as a human being, the contribution you are making to touch so many people that you don't even know who they are?
My personal hope is that the thing that inspires me the most isn't the achievements specifically that I've made in my life, but really how, when everything was at its worst, I found something positive to pull out of it. And I think that's a message that people can use every single day in their life. Because nearly every day in our lives, we all have something happen that makes us feel a little down. Hopefully we have good things happen too. But if we have some sort of armor that we can put on ourselves and we can empower ourselves with, we can expect the negative things to come and know how to deal with them. In fact, turn them into good things, because that's what challenges us to grow. So, yeah.
So in addition to people writing stories about you and making movies about you, you've done some writing of your own. Could you tell us a little bit about your own work in writing and how you managed to break out and let the world become aware of your success?
Yeah, in prison, one of my biggest projects was to work on this physics theory. It was attempting to do grand unification, which means combine quantum mechanics with general relativity in one picture. And it turns out that this picture that I was working on is the only intuitively accessible picture that I'm aware of. And right or wrong, you never really know for sure in science if your theories are right, but this one is extremely intuitively valuable and gives us access to things like what the electric field is or the magnetic field or how to translate gravity in a way that's similar to the way Einstein did, and so on. Now that book is finishing up, and I've finished all the last little edits and figures, and it's going to be coming out in April this year. And I've also started another book, actually. I haven't told you about this, but I'm halfway through writing a book about what it was like in county jail and prison. A bunch of vignettes of the experiences and encounters and the struggles we had to go through.
Well, I'm sure that there's going to be a wide audience for both of those books, probably a different segment of audiences, but people who will find value in your work nevertheless. And as you recall, when I was mentioning the Straight A Guide, one of the components, awareness, indicates that the harder we work, the more deliberate our efforts are to achieve success. We become aware of opportunities, but the world becomes aware of us. And it's my understanding that through the course of your writing, some very influential people, besides Ben Mesrick and the Hollywood producers, have become interested in your life and have opened new opportunities for you to make a meaningful contribution to the advancement of mankind. Can you tell us a little bit about how that opportunity opened and what you're doing today?
Yeah, there's two main stories there. One, while I was traveling, I was still trying to keep up online with editing the book, and I had set up this platform where I could send the current version of the book to people for free in PDF format. And then they would read it and they'd send me back comments or find errors or ask questions. And from that feedback, I would then edit the book further to make it as clear and crisp as possible and succinct as possible. And I got a lot of positive feedback from that, and people were very excited about this new vision, this new way of seeing the world through a lens of physics. One of the people who asked for the book and didn't identify themselves in any particular way read it, and 2 weeks later sent me an email. And long story short, it turns out that this person was the science advisor to a billionaire. And after reading the book, he was super excited to start up a think tank centered around the idea of testing some of the ideas in my physics theories. So that's where I work now as a theoretical physicist for this private think tank, and it's a fantastic job. We're building all kinds of labs and buying a bunch of equipment and hiring new physicists and chemists and engineers, and the sky's the limit on this one. May I ask what your annual budget is for putting a laboratory together like that? We apparently don't have a cap to our budget.
Well, what have you spent so far?
I'm not quite sure. And since August, I think, we bought our own scanning electron microscope. We've got our own Raman spectrometer, we've built 3 different lab spaces, and we've hired 15 people. And I don't handle the money myself, so...
you're talking about millions of dollars of an investment that you are controlling and overseeing.
I'm participating in. We all like to think of ourselves as equals because we're scientists.
Well, that is an amazing accomplishment right there, but I think I cut you off. You were going to tell us about a second part.
Yeah, so when I was in prison with you, I would get these science magazines and try to keep up with the amazing new ideas that were at least being reported. And one of the ones that got me most excited was this one by this guy named Garrett Lisi, who had this new 8-dimensional Lie group way of trying to explain the fundamental particles of nature. And he did some TED Talks, but he really was a rock star in the media because he was a physicist, but he was also somebody that had a well-balanced life. So he was also famous for being a surfer. So he would surf every day, lives in Maui, and did his physics, and he had a good love life. And I'm reading this from prison, I'm like, wow, that's a guy that's exactly like the kind of life I want to live. And this was exciting. It was an inspiration for me. Well, this New Year's, I was in communication with a few of the students that are going into physics in college now that are reading my book, and that's kind of pushed them into the physics field. And in our conversations, I had mentioned to at least 2 people that I'm a fan of Garrett Lisi's. And so we had conversations for a while about that. And then I get I get a message on Facebook trying to add me, and it was from somebody named Garrett Lisi. I'm like, oh, okay, one of my friends has made a fake profile to play a prank on me. Because it turns out I had added to my list of goals for the new year only one new thing for that year, and it was to meet Garrett Lisi before I die. And within a few weeks of actually just putting that on my list, and hadn't done anything other than just put it on my list, it turns out it was the real Garrett Lisi that had reached out and asked me to come visit him in Hawaii. And so my work sent me out to spend a week with him in Hawaii, and then I found myself being taught how to kite surf from Garrett Lisi, which was a phenomenal dream for me.
Well, there you have it again, putting yourself out there, making the world aware of you. Great things happen. Thad Roberts, I really want to thank you for sharing your amazing, extraordinary story with the Earning Freedom Network. You are going to inspire everybody who listens to this podcast, but none more than me, because I will use your story to teach other people that regardless of where they are today, with a methodical, clear, deliberate plan, they can create success, will it into their life, and celebrate it every single day. You are a man who lives, you are the embodiment, the personification of passion and energy, and I consider it a privilege to know you, Thad. Thank you so much for sharing your story with the Earning Freedom Network. May I ask you now, please tell our audience how to get in touch with you. Tell them the name of your book. Tell them anything that you'd like to share before we close out today's episode.
Yeah, of course. My website is einsteinsintuition.com, and you can basically reach me everywhere through there, or watch my TED Talk. You can just look it up under my name, Thad Roberts, and then order my book after April.
Yeah, I tell you what, they will give you feedback. I will be providing links on my show notes to everything about you, and I'm going to reach out to some editors that I know in the media and see if I can't publish the story to give us a wider circulation, because yours is a story that needs to be told. Yours is a story that helps illuminate and illustrate this message that prison bars just bars alone in concrete do not a prison make. A lot of people can live in prison in their own mind. You know how to earn freedom, and I salute you and applaud you and wish you continuing good health and success.
Thank you very much.
We've reached the end of another episode on Prison Professors. We'll be back tomorrow with another inspiring guest. If you haven't subscribed to the show, please do so by visiting iTunes and tuning in to the Prison Professors podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review the show. If you'd like to have more information on how we can help you, please visit prisonprofessors.com or text the word Prison Pro to 44222. Thank you.